Well, thank you for joining us on episode 2 of the Hoodies Magazine podcast. The first one went really well with Matt. So, again, thank you to Matt. Our next guest, our second guest, is Lee Hanson, who was a Tasmanian Senate candidate for One Nation, successful business person, mum, Tasmanian resident. Lee Hanson, thank you for joining us on the Hoodies Magazine podcast.
Hi, Ben. Thank you for the invite. Excited to join you today.
Now, well, thank you for being here. And as I said to you just offline before, thank you for working out technology better than me. But anyway, I suppose, look, I'm 53, and I think as you get older, you become more aware of things in the world that are around you that affect your family and life as we know it or grew up with or whatever. The big thing over the weekend were these rallies. They were labelled by mainstream media as being all sorts of things, from racist to, we did see some really extremist right wing people attend them, which was hugely disappointing. But if we're going to have left wing politics and mainstream media label Middle Australia as racist if they go to these things, where are people going to find the place to actually vent their frustrations? Because there's so much of it out there. Like, where do we go? What do we say?
Yeah. Look, firstly, you're spot on in the sense that the narrative and a deterrent for the marches of late have been if you go or you'll be associated with an extremist or a neo-Nazi is simply wrong. And that whole narrative was an agenda to suppress people from having a voice. So it's very important that people do not let this deter them. Who I am and my mum's daughter, I'm quite familiar with being branded some pretty harsh, unjust, and simply untrue labels. It can be hurtful, absolutely, but you cannot let them win. We need to ignore the labels, and we shouldn't be ashamed or made to feel ashamed for loving our country and caring about the future of our nation. I attended the event here in Hobart, and I wasn't expecting to speak, but I was asked to get up the spur of the moment by the attendees. And when I stood up and I looked over the crowd, we were singing Australian songs and there were all the flags, the colours of the flags, blue and red and yellow and green. I actually got quite teary. It was a really moving, passionate, sincere, heartfelt event where I could see the frustration, but the patriotism and the love from the people around. And that was the pure purpose of the event, not to let these extremists take over and take control. And I didn't see any of that at Hobart that I attended as well. So the key is don't let them win. Don't let them control the narrative.
And look, I think you've absolutely nailed it. And I think the thing for me about the magazine and the fledgling little media company we have is that we have so much left-wing, right-wing politics, media and opinion. There's nothing really in the middle. And we have, I think you're absolutely right. Regardless of wherever you sit on that political divide, how do we tolerate the Australian flag being burnt? The Australian flag was yesterday, I think it was yesterday, Jacinta Price, I think she used it as leverage to make a point, there's no doubt. But regardless of whether or not she used it to make a point or not, there were still Palestinian flags or representations of that movement in, I think it was the Senate, so correct me if I'm wrong. How do you then throw the Australian flag out? How do we, in America, Trump is now making it an offence to burn the American flag.
Mm-hmm.
So why are we allowed, how does that happen? How are we not, making more of that and standing up for that? And I think that's the thing that people are finding frustration. We're not neo-Nazi right-wing extremists or even left-wing extremists. We just don't want the flag burnt. It's simple as that.
And that's it. It should be that simple, but it's been politicised. And right, in Parliament, you're made to feel ashamed. So Labor voted down in Parliament this week to criminalise. So One Nation put a bill through to criminalise those who burn our flag. Un-Australian. It's simply unacceptable. The flag is something that honours and represents those who have served and fought under past, current and future, right? It's the one thing that should unite us as a nation. But here's Labor shut it down and voted against it being a criminal offence to burn our flag. Now, how un-Australian could you possibly get that you don't recognise? And the offence of even that in itself by, as you say, Jacinta, who was not allowed to wear, it was voted against by Labor and Greens to wear the flag in Parliament, as well as actually Mum, Senator Hanson, did the same. So can't wear it in Parliament, even though it is surrounded by the Australian flag in Parliament, and then not a criminal offence to burn our flag. It's causing so much division in this country, and they can't seem to see this. It should unite us, not divide us.
The issue is that we have all these things that are politicised. The voice to Parliament. Like, I, believe it or not, used to sing opera 1,000 years ago and went through places like Newman and Port Hedland in WA and saw firsthand how lost some Indigenous people are. And if it wasn't for BHP in particular, places like Newman and Port Hedland wouldn't exist. There are Indigenous people out there that need help desperately. But we have politicised issues that shouldn't be political footballs for politicians to kick around. And the flag is a big one. We see people stand on the world stage with our flag. But when we criticise, what are the solutions? If they're going to politicise these things, what are the actual solutions that we can do to, help Indigenous people? If we're going to have an argument about changing the flag, let's have a discussion.
Well, the first thing is, do we really have our members of Parliament adequately representing Australia and Australians? I'd simply say no. So that's our first problem. If people need to really start to understand what these people are saying and doing on behalf of us on the floor of Parliament. I think quite often we get caught up in our day-to-day lives, as we all do. Issues like this is something that we all need to become more aware of and understand what's happening. We need to start to educate ourselves as to who these representatives are in Parliament, and we need to make a stand. Everybody has members of Parliament. Contact them, reach out to them. Their job is to represent us. They're meant to be our voice. So we need to tell them what we expect of them, what their views are. And if they don't act accordingly, then they shouldn't be there, and make sure our vote counts next time. So we do get people that are on the floor of Parliament that genuinely represent us as to the nation we want to be, and get to the real root cause of the issues. So to your point, quite often what happens in Parliament is people are stuck in a narrow vision mind, right? The debates aren't actually occurring. Conversations are being shut down or are blatantly ignored because they don't want to have the conversation. They don't want to have the conversation because, immediately One Nation submitted that bill. So we're not even going to come to the floor, or we'll shut it down immediately and not have the debate. Or that comes from the Greens, or that comes from the Liberals. They don't want to work with each other. They're so ingrained in towing the line of the major political parties that they don't open their eyes or take their blinkers off to actually have good debate. And that's what we need, is people in the floor of Parliament are going to work together. Isn't that what we expect of them? Work together, have the conversation.
It's like, we know as decent humans with empathy and understanding of normal society, of what's fair and reasonable, you have debates and conversations and arguments for and against. That's how it works. But you have the mainstream two political parties just pandering to minority groups that they think will get them votes, but then offsets the entire thing, which leads to this division that we're talking about.
Correct. And look, mainstream media has a big part to play in this. They are feeding the narrative. They are only disclosing and sharing the information with the general populace that they want you to know. So that's why I say people need to do their research and actually go and look at this information themselves and start to inquire, because quite often what I see on mainstream media feeds to the narrative of the major political parties, and that is it, right? So how do we get out of that bubble and start to educate ourselves? And it is a big part of it as well.
But then if we start talking about wanting to go against that mainstream media narrative, then guess what? We become, the online conspiracy theorist. When I started the magazine, which was peak COVID, like 2021, my family and I, we got vaccinated. We did the whole learning from high school, whatever, online. But it wasn't until COVID until that whole thing began to be about government incompetence and bureaucratic incompetence that I started writing. And it was never about conspiracy theories. It wasn't about the Rothschilds and Bill Gates or anything else. It was about, what are we doing to get kids back to school? What are we doing to help facilitate small business survival? How does JobKeeper actually look? Because we didn't understand it. And what are we doing to get society moving? I would get 120,000 hits on posts. And again, I'm just a middle-aged guy sitting in an office that can string a sentence together. But the mainstream media stuff is broken because if we go against it, then we have our voices shut down because we get labeled as conspiracy theorists or right-wing fundamentalists that just think, we're mental. It's just ridiculous. And
Yeah, I agree.
because you stood up for what you believed. Whether people think that's right or wrong, that is up to them. But this is where you've got to actually stand up against all of this because the odds is totally stacked against you.
Yeah, agree. And look, to your point, I suppose I'm a little bit different because I've been brought up by an incredibly strong woman who has taught and instilled upon me to live and work that way. So, always have a voice, always stand up for what you believe in, the resilience, the tenacity. You get knocked down, you build yourself up even stronger. So I suppose I'm a little bit different in that sense. I don't know anything different. That's been instilled upon me, and I'm so grateful for it. I'm actually quite a shy person. I'm what you call an introvert. I hate being the center of attention. But in all the jobs I've ever had, or even in my personal life, I'll sit back and I'll observe and I'll listen because it's important to take in everyone else's views. But the moment something hits the line that that's not fair or just or reasonable and it's impacting other people, that's where I kick in. And I can't help myself and I have to stand up and I have to fight for what's right. Yes, you're going to be knocked down, criticized, called every name under the sun. But the funny thing is, it only makes me stronger. It only makes me more determined because with each one of those negative criticisms, we get 1,000 more thank yous. You have no idea without you. You're giving us hope. Keep fighting, keep speaking up. And the support for One Nation and myself as well is growing enormously because I think people are starting to cut through and they're seeing that. And the recent events about the flag and the future of Australia has shown that One Nation is the only party that's actually standing by them and speaking for them and with them versus, with these marches, who else showed up?
Well,
No one. They criticised them.
And it begs the question. I mean, the whole Nigel Farage thing in the UK with UK reform and everything. I mean, because there's this massive move away from the mainstream parties in the UK, do you think One Nation and I mean, it was suggested 1,000 times by various people during COVID as well. Do you think that we could see one day a new party or a new body actually knock? Like, I think the coalition is probably out of power for a generation, given how I still don't understand why they don't go back to their original philosophies. If you mention the word freedom to Australians, if you go back to those Menzies ideologies, that freedom of the individual, right to live your life the way you choose, all those things, it just seems like, anyway. But could we one day see a minor party actually take government in Australia, do you think?
Absolutely. 100%. People are starting to realize and understand that what's happening in this country, and they're afraid. You want your government to ensure that you feel safe in your home, that you have a future for your children. You work hard and you're rewarded hard equally, but you can go through day-to-day life. There's so many issues happening in this country right now: cost of living, severe homelessness, education, health. There's so many issues that are really affecting everyday Australians. So yes, could there be a third party that rises up from that genuinely tackles the issues, has common sense solutions to help support Australians? Yes. And do I believe that's One Nation? Wholeheartedly. And people are starting to realise that. I think Labor will have their turn. I really think it's starting to come to light and the narrative's changing. Coalition, yes. It's such a shame that they haven't capitalised this opportunity to go back to their core values and speak up for Australians. they've lost it. They've completely lost their way and there's in-party division. Can they ever get it back? I'm not sure. But, who's the one party that's constantly been challenging the government and standing up for Australians? It's One Nation. They're the real opposition. And when time the party take power, I have absolute confidence. And that will only be achievable if people get behind One Nation, support the party, cut through the false narrative that we have been misled as to who the party is of One Nation. That's all BS from the media as well.
Do you think is it a question as well of as more money for One Nation, being able to raise more funds, corporate support, media support? You look at the ABC. I mean, the ABC are a classic. I listen to, in Melbourne we have 3AW, which is that way. I won't do it on camera because I'll get confused. But you've got which is right wing, and you've got ABC 774 as left wing, and there's no middle ground. But and the 3AW will pick up the phone to Jeff Kennett or Tony Abbott or whoever else they can get on the phone from the right, and the ABC are the same. Is it with One Nation? Is it getting more support by the media, more money through corporates and all those sorts of things that can propel them into potentially being that new party that could take it?
Look, I think it's a combination of things. One Nation doesn't receive big corporate donations or union donations like the other majors do. We operate very creatively and strategically through mum and dad memberships, right? So dad and retiree memberships, pensioners, that's what keeps us going. Their membership helps us fund, and the very small donations that they make is tremendous and means the world to us because it keeps us going and fighting. So we use other channels to get our message out, whether it be social media, whether it's through other terms of merchandise or marketing as well. But the real way that we speak to our supporters and get the message out is actually being on the ground with people, holding events. And we're about to launch branches, 150 plus branches across Australia. And this will enable us to work with our supporters and our members to enable them to have a voice, to communicate, to collaborate, to spread the messaging as well. So it's about growing and building the party. It's about using with a very small budget, being very creative, having a high impact with that. Because we know the mainstream media is never going to give us the airplay. It doesn't suit them. So yes, it's everyday conversations that will.
But you got fantastic traction off those cartoons that you did as well.
Yeah.
They were
Yes.
they were like anyone that over the age, I reckon maybe 45 will remember. What was it? Oh, there was this TV. There was Spitting Image, and then there was another one on the radio that used to talk about various politicians in a comedic way, and that used to get great traction. And that was a little bit reminiscent of those. But they were hilarious. Even if you liked Albo, you would have thought that they were funny.
Yes, they are. And it's a very clever way to help educate the public, even how to vote, how the preferencing system works, the difference between the majors, the minors, and those sorts of things. So yes, it is educational. Bit of humour. Got to have a bit of humour. It's made an Aussie character as well.
I mean, coming in the preferences as well. I mean, just to pick up on that, I mean, we've got Albo in Canberra the other day saying wants 4-year terms, create more electorates. And you go, are we now? I mean, it's a great time to rid himself of his opposition permanently in the coalition. But is he now just getting a bit too ahead of himself? I mean, it didn't work for Bob Hall. Surely it doesn't work for.
No. You tell me, why does the current government want more electorates, more members of parliament? Now, you speak to everyday Australians. One, that's more taxpayers' money to fill the coffers for ridiculous salaries for political members. Do we really need more people in there? Will that help them get greater balance of power to secure their roles? And then it's not just the members of parliament, it's then all their staffers, etc., which is so hypocritical because we've just seen since we've gone back in this term of government, the Prime Minister cut staff from certain members of parliament It wasn't a fair, equitable decision. There were only members of parliament that had their staff cuts. So we're saying, save costs. Let's cut your staff to make it more difficult for you to do your job and represent your constituents. But hang on, let's create more electorates and get more members of parliament here, more bureaucracy, more cost to the taxpayer. It doesn't serve the people. You speak to everyday Australians and they actually think we need less, not more.
And this is the reality of those moves. I was sold that it would enable people in bigger electorates to visit more people. And you go, no, it's not. But that's the way it was sold. And there was nothing to counter it from anybody else going, this is just what they're saying. It's like Daniel Andrews being in China. Like, come on. It's just this bunch of absolute rubbish. Now, are you going to run again? I mean, you seem to represent a common sense perspective on all of this, and somebody that, as you say, is part of your nature, having grown up around, obviously, your mother, to go, yeah, I'm not having that.
Yeah, absolutely. So since, I had a whirlwind of an election, I'll be honest.
Didn't you have a 4-week campaign?
I know my mum's still cranky that I didn't give her more notice.
Well, yeah, Mum, sorry on that one.
I know. She's been trying for years because of the type of person and character I am. She's like, you do such a great job. They need you. And I'm like, Mum, I'm shy. I don't like being center of attention. Why would I do it? Because everything we've been through, why would I put myself through that? But I reached a point of being a mum and my own experiences as a mother and an adult and how difficult the cost of living even for myself. And I've lost complete hope for the future, right? I'm seeing things getting worse. So I made the decision I'll run very late. I knew it was a long shot, but I had to give it a good crack. I think I did quite well for such a short period and many obstacles to overcome, particularly being in Tassie. We don't have the party embedded here in Tasmania, so it was very hard. We didn't have connected support. So it was trying to find out who's who to help through the campaign. But it's inspired me enormously. It's given me fight. It's given me a greater purpose. And as a result, since the election, I said to Mum and the team, I want to learn more. I need to learn more. So I've since joined the National Executive for One Nation. I'm now supporting the head office who run off the smell of an oily rag with very few team members because they're trying to do enormous amount of work with very small teams. So I'm trying to help them now too. I'm currently going through the process of getting the party registered in Tasmania. I'm about to launch 5 branches here in Tasmania. So my absolute purpose is to help grow the party and embed it within Tasmania and start working more broadly with my community members down here. I will be putting my hand up to run for the Tasmanian Senate again as a candidate, and that's what I'm working towards. And I have this longer runway to really help get out amongst the community and also get their input for localised Tasmanian policy design so I can adequately represent them.
Well, I mean, one of the big issues in Tasmania is that AFL stadium. And look, I watched the footy last night, but probably not as passionate as I was when, my team were doing well in the 90s in North Melbourne. But it does seem an extraordinary amount of money to be demanding a state like Tasmania spend for, I know it'll get maybe full sometimes, but you go $900 million, I think is the figure that the AFL have said. I don't know how you afford it really, but anyway.
Yeah, it's a hard one, Ben. This one was a big topic when I was campaigning for the federal election. And I travelled the state and did different speaking engagements. And my job is to say, what do the people want? And every venue I went to, I said, what do you think of the stadium? And the overwhelming feedback, which resonated with me, is we cannot afford it. When we've got people sleeping in cars or on the street, increased homelessness, when we've got hospitals shut down here in Tasmania or rural and regional remote regions can't get basic health care, or we can't get into doctors and GPs for weeks at a time, or we've got complications with our education system, why would you spend an exorbitant amount of money, taxpayers' dollars, on a stadium? Is that really our priority? Now, the challenge is like the passionate community of football and the benefits it brings to community, especially children. I completely agree. My kids play footy. My husband's an absolute AFL follower through and through. We want an AFL team, yes. But what I find really hard to fathom is the deal or no deal situation presented by the AFL, Australia AFL, to say, well, you can have it, but we must build this stadium in this location for this exorbitant amount of money. Now, wouldn't we want our politicians to push back harder to say, surely there's got to be a middle ground? Surely, can't we at least utilise our current stadiums for an interim period until we can afford a stadium, or come up with another way so it doesn't take away funding from our essential services, which are stretched beyond pillar to post currently? So you've got to balance the priorities. And as a member of the community, that's all I ask for as well, is saying, how do we get a team and stop being to ransom and told that we can only have it if we build a stadium, and actually work harder and fight harder for a better middle ground, or a way that we can achieve both? And that's just not what I've seen, nor the transparency or visibility of all the detail behind this proposal as well. And that's what the people of Tasmania are seeking.
It's the common sense behind it. It doesn't matter what your political allegiances are, whether they're left, right, centre, whatever. There has to be some new type of common sense that looks after the average Australian, or Australians in general, whether they're black, white, yellow, green, whatever. There has to be this common sense approach, and it has to be of, can we afford it? It's not going to be popular if you turned around and said, AFL, we're not going to do it. It's not going to be popular. But the long-term benefit would be, you don't have to come up with $900 million. Anyway, if you ever want to come back on and you want to talk common sense, you please let me know, okay?
I speak common sense every day, Ben, so more than
Well,
happy to.
yeah, like I think my chances of getting the left and the right, the Labor and the Liberal on this podcast are slim and probably none. But I think anybody that wants to come on and talk common sense is more than welcome. And you are more than welcome back. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Ben.